Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Windows. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight I'm filling in for my colleague Dina Hussein, as tonight we'll be focusing on the entrepreneurship and the future of entrepreneurship and the digital transformation in the country, and how it will be affecting the educational system in Egypt for the future generations. And I'm honored to be having with me over Windows for tonight Mr. Mostafa, the entrepreneur and the education advisor. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Hello, Mr. Ahmed, and good evening.
Good evening to you too. First of all, the entrepreneurship depends on education, depends on what happens in the first 16, 20, 25 years of education and higher education combined. So, in your opinion, how does education affect the future of Egypt in general, and more specifically the future of entrepreneurship and the small and medium enterprises?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
First, thank you for hosting me today. First, this is like a crucial question because education affects, I would say, the future of most of the countries, especially developing countries such as Egypt.
Yes.
So basically, education and specifically, if we are talking about education, we have the undergraduate, the university education, and the secondary education as well, if we're gonna divide it that way.
Yes.
Both of those sectors of education are very different, and it affects the future of the employability in a sense. Maybe we can't even imagine it, especially after COVID-19.
Yes.
So basically, I would say they affect the future of Egypt generally, hugely, in the next couple of years at least.
Yes, you've mentioned the COVID-19 and how it affected the whole world, Egypt and Africa and the Arab world. But here in Egypt we had differences, something that we depended on the online technology, on the tablets, on the online learning after the COVID-19 and during the COVID-19 crisis in the country and in the world. How do you see this as an important step to be transforming into the digital or the online learning in the future of the country?
As a matter of fact, the COVID-19 has actually impacted us in a way that boosted the digital transformation,
Yes.
which we have been running and trying to set out in the past, I would say, decade. And it became faster than we even expected after COVID-19. Overnight, we have seen the digital transformation almost 100% fully. Students and parents started to actually accept the idea of learning online, and the idea of even, which is one of the most important things, eventually working online.
Yes.
Because they are using the same tools, which is like Slack or whatever, tools that they will use if they graduate and trying to work. They will use almost the same Zoom, whatever softwares that you are using during their learning process. I would say that we use at least similar tools after graduation. So the COVID-19, this is one of the very few pros of COVID-19 that
Yes.
did in the past 2
Yes.
years.
You said that a lot of people have accepted the idea of learning online and working online. How much of a proportion of people working and learning online do you expect it to be happening in the future? Do you think that 50% of working and learning would be online in the future, maybe more, maybe less? How much of it do you see it?
Well, based on the latest researches, like I've read some of the latest researches about that, and at least they say 60% of all the labor will be converted to digital, or I would say remote employees.
Yes.
And remote employees is basically that you work from anywhere in the world using digital tools and having the space that you can be able to work from whatever place that you are located in. So I would say at least 60% we will be transformed into this digital world sooner or later.
in the world and in Egypt.
Of course,
60% of people will be
60%
working
the research was
online.
about the worldwide labor market, but I think Egypt would follow that as well. Maybe not in the same percentage, to be honest, because the infrastructures that we have in Egypt are not that developed in terms of the infrastructure of the internet connection, for example. Anything related to that. So basically, I would say that Egypt would follow that, and we have seen some of the recent, updates in terms of education and also in the workplace. That at least I've heard the hybrid work mode.
Yes.
That maybe employees go for the office 2 days or 3 days a week, and the other would be virtual. So that actually ensures that the idea started to be accepted. And the concept itself is very accepted by most of the people right now.
Yes, in the past 8 years under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, we have come to know the expression of digital transformation, working online, learning online, even doing a lot of business online and finishing a lot of governmental issues online as well. So you say that the infrastructure is not really ready here in the country. When do you think we will be ready fully to be just moving neck and neck with the rest of the world in terms of online learning, online working, and to be moving closer and closer to the fully digital transformation process?
That's a great question, actually, because that's, I would say, I would get back to the government policies regarding to that, because as much as the government trying to fasten this process to have a well done infrastructure, especially for internet and whatever related to that support this system, I would say that we can be able during 5 years or so to be fully equipped based on the amount of support that would the government provide for this regard. So basically, I would say it's a matter of how we able to fasten the process of having a full equipment or to equip the whole process faster than usual.
Before moving to another project and another idea to be discussing with you, Mr. Mostafa, the educational process in the world, not just in Egypt, how do you think or how far it affects the global economies nowadays? Because, and we know that it affects the job markets in Egypt, in Africa, in the world. So indirectly, it could be changing the face of the global economies in the future.
100%, because the education right now is a big industry. If we are talking about international education in itself, for some countries, I would say an example like the UK. The UK actually, a big stream of their national income comes only from international education. We are talking about 28 billion based on the latest research in 2018 that was released, that a big income, as a matter of fact, a big stream of the income, that 28 billion pounds are actually coming from international education. So this is a huge industry that we are talking about, and unfortunately that we don't have that developed also in the developing countries, specifically in Egypt. If we are comparing that to other maybe Arabic countries,
yes,
coming actually, because as I live in the UAE, I've seen that the UAE has become a capital of international education recently, because they are attracting many universities from abroad actually to open up a campus inside the UAE. But for Egypt, I still think that we can do better than that, especially that we have started to have some universities, foreign universities that come here and and open up a campus, an international campus,
yes,
that would provide international education for the students here in Egypt. But I believe that we can support even this regard more, because we want actually, and specifically in this very hard situations that we are living. I'm talking about economic situation right now.
Yes.
I believe that international education can be a great stream of national income here in Egypt, if we have developed it in the right way.
How do you think education has developed in the past 8 years, normal education and higher education as well, under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, especially that we have mentioned what happened during the coronavirus pandemic and the process of going more and more into the online learning?
Okay, like the last decade, honestly, as an education advisor, I would give for the academic related curriculums, for example, and this kind of stuff for the higher, not the higher education. I would start with the secondary education and under secondary education. Basically, I've seen that we need to improve the curriculums and, you know, and the kind of technologies that we are using, because we're still in the stage of basic technologies that we are using in our schools. But I believe that after the coronavirus, as we have mentioned, that we started to see a little bit advanced technologies that had been using. For example, some virtual labs have been started actually to be used inside schools, which is basically instead of the students would go for a lab and do their you know, chemical or experiments inside the school, we started to see a virtual lab that the students can, you know, log in their device from the comfort of their homes, and they can go and they can do their experiments inside this virtual lab. This is something that actually would give us a little bit, for example, boosting for using technology more in education. That's like, for example, for the secondary education. For the higher education, still based on, you know, the universities that you will go to, whether it's like public university, private universities. Some private universities provide facilities, more facilities than public universities, for example, for some areas such as medicine, you know, dentistry and the medical related majors, engineering as well, the STEM sciences as we always talk about. So basically, yeah, it's based on actually which stage the students are using technology, and of course the other, you know, related factors.
In education and higher education, we are trying to invest and develop what we have nowadays. But you mentioned the United Arab Emirates, and you lived there, and of course you were taught there. Maybe if you can give us a quick comparison between what is happening in the United Arab Emirates in terms of education and in Egypt, how far are we behind? Are we even behind the United Arab Emirates? How can we be going neck and neck with them and maybe be better in the future?
Actually, I'm not gonna give a personal opinion about this. I'm gonna talk also about the researches that have been done and surveys about, like, in terms of, for example, the ranking of the education system. Of course, in the UAE, they are, you know, more advanced. You know, we are still behind some of the Gulf countries, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and even Saudi Arabia. The point is that in the United Arab Emirates, they are using technology, which is related to the last question, because
technology in education.
In education,
not just being online.
Yes, technology in education in every aspect of the education. So we are talking about, which is a big also industry right now, the education technology. We have seen startups even in education technologies that have been growing even after COVID-19, in a sense that they get investment over hundreds of millions of dollars in the last couple of years, because of how these countries are using technology in order to advance the quality of education for their national, you know, education system.
Is it just the money? Do we need more money to be invested in education?
No.
Do we have calibers, good calibers here in the country enough
we have great brains
going into the future?
As I always say, we have great resources. I'm gonna talk like in general. It's
in terms of money or human resources?
Human resources, but also, yeah, of course, I would say that even the money-related thing would not be the big stumbling block.
It's not the main problem.
It's not the main problem.
So what is the main problem?
Actually, I would say that we have to a little bit improve the policies that related education. We wanted to actually, I've seen that some policies are outdated, that we need to actually update those, you know, policies in order to just cope up with the world right now. Because even like in the comparison as we like mentioned, we are still just with a few resources. If we exploited those resources, would be able even to go neck and neck.
So the development that we have seen under Dr. Tariq Shawqi How do you assess it?
As a matter of fact, I have to admit that there is a great development have happened. You know.
So it's a step in the right direction.
Of course, especially even if like a little bit, it seems like it was misused. Like for example, using tablets or using any related technology. I know that the Egyptian students would still need a little bit of awareness campaign about how they can use those technologies in order to advance the quality of learning that they get.
Yes.
So this is very important, but I believe that it's a great step towards a little bit of advancement in our education system.
You've mentioned that, of course, we need money, but we do have the calibers, we do have the human resources. On the other hand, can education be a source of drawing investments, getting money, and boosting the GDP growth in the country in terms of attracting international students, the recruitment of the international students? Do you think that we can have that opportunity?
100%, surely. Thank you for asking this, because as a matter of fact, Egypt is a great study destination. If we are looking about all the factors that we have in Egypt in terms of climate, in terms of the resources that we have, in terms of the diversity that we have, the language, like, you know, we most of the Egyptians, they speak several languages as based on the latest researches as well. So we have great resources to be a great study destination, at least in the Middle East. You know, in the MENA region. We are talking about the Middle East and North Africa. I believe that we have all the needed factors to be the top study destination, to attract more Arabic and even non-Arabic students to study here in Egypt. We have great universities, by the way, public universities, which, you know, have been ranked among the top 500 universities, are based on the, you know, QS ranking and the best university rankings around the world. So we have, like, I would say we have the resources, but we need actually to exploit those resources. We need to put ourselves into action in order to get up with an action plan how to transform Egypt into a study destination, for example, by 2030, for example, to be actually an action plan to provide this. And this would be, you know, to answer the next part, the other part of the question, which would be a great boosting for our GDP, you know, our source of income. As I mentioned, for example, the UK right now, I would say a big portion of the national income of the UK are coming only from international education, from attracting international students to study in the universities in the UK. This is one of the best. As a matter of fact, they are still in the top because of that, actually, in international education. So they are reputed as the capital of international education around the world. Also in the States, it started, of course, even after, you know, the recent circumstances, they also started to be one of the best study destinations that are around the world. And of course, they have the best universities around the world. So basically, yeah, of course, Egypt has all the capabilities, if so to speak, but again, we have to improve a little bit of policies.
You said that we need to exploit the resources that we have, the money that we have, and to be drawing more investments, to be generating more money and more educational skills for the students as well. So you say that we need a plan. What is the best part or the first part of the plan? Where do we start with this plan?
If we like, the first step, I would say, from my own point of view, is actually hiring the best human resources. We start with the human resources. So we're hiring the specialists in this field. You know, especially because I've been working in the international student recruitment field for the past, I would say, 7 years or so. So working in that field in several countries, here in Egypt, I've seen that it's not always about a specialty. It's just like anybody can actually work sometimes in this field without having appropriate experience or appropriate education. So first, we have to actually to maximize the specialty, you know, stream, like how we can be able to hire, to recruit the best specialist in this field.
So we need the right people, or the right person at the right place.
Exactly, 100%. I think this is the very first step in order to do a great action plan and actually to reach our goal in the next few years.
But this plan, and as you mentioned, we need the right people. Are you meaning the right teachers? Are you meaning the right staff, the right students?
The right team.
The right team.
The right team.
So it contains all of these.
All of these aspects, of course. It's not about, of course, teachers are like, you know, a main aspect, one of the main, if they are not the main aspect, they are one of the, you know, integral aspects of the education process. But of course, you know, we are talking about every other, you know, team member, because, you know, actually education, the stakeholders of education are so many. We are talking about also the other players in education. We are talking about the role of investors as well, because the investors, they have a great role actually to boost, you know, the education wheel. In terms of like doing some investment related to opening schools or international campuses for universities, all of that would reflect on the education in a way or another. So of course teachers are important, but also, for example, anybody would work in the education industry would of course support the whole process to be, you know, faster and faster.
Investment and money is very important in every aspect of life, and of course it is very important for the future of education. But how much do you think that investment should be involved in the future of education? Because we can see in Egypt nowadays that a lot of schools, a lot of universities are depending on what the parents would be paying, not the quality of education, not what we will be getting at the end of the journey for my children, for whoever enters the educational process in schools and in universities. How much investors should be involved in education in Egypt and in general?
In Egypt, they have actually to be engaged more than at least the current situation, the current scene that we have in. Of course, in general, I would say, as I said, the industry of education, international education specifically, is a big industry, and it's booming and booming because it has this connection with employability. So this is something that we also want to talk about, because employability is a big part of the equation. We cannot speak about education without speaking about employability, because the outputs of education are to the workplace, to the marketplace. So I would say, in general, of course, investors are, you know, into this industry around the world, but in Egypt we need more engagement from the side of investors inside Egypt in order to actually even diversify. If, for example, maybe an investor, like they doing some investments in the hospitality industry, for example, they can still diversify their portfolio by investing in education. And this is not related to speciality here, because speciality is something else. Still, investors, we see, you know, great investors in the States and in the UK, they invest in multiple industries in the same time, which is something that we would love to see from Egyptian investors and local investors as well.
If we switch to the future of education, which is the job market, the global job market, after finishing my educational journey in a school, in a university, what am I going to work? What are the possibilities for me as an Egyptian to be working in the future? Because we know that a lot of things are changing. The world is changing for the digital transformation, for the technology. I think professions, a number of professions are fading. They are decreasing. We don't see them anymore. How do you see the global job market in the future?
That's, you know, that's great, because the annual report forum, for example, there is a report that from the World, you know, Economic Forum, which happens, you know, in Geneva every other year. The last, like they did this report about some jobs that are fading completely. Like, for example, accounting, for example, the accounting related jobs are fading in a sense, because the softwares right now are, you know, replacing accountants, for example, and the other are booming. There are some other sectors, other IT related jobs, especially IT, information technology, I mean, they are booming and they are coming in a big sense. We are talking about, for example, in the last report, they have highlighted the importance of data science as a field, and data scientists, like they are graduates of this field, will be having, you know, in terms of even of salaries, will be having the best salaries for, you know, for this field. We are talking about the importance of artificial intelligence, because it, you know, almost went into every aspect, every field every walk of life right now. So artificial intelligence specialists are very important right now. As a matter of fact, would still be important in the next at least 4 or 5 decades. So those information technology related, they are the future, and we have to accept that whether we like it or not, because we still have this mentality that people, they are not accepting that information technology would replace everything that we are living right now. We started to see, for example, driverless cars, right? Even in Arabic countries, like in the United Arab Emirates, we have seen that. We have seen that, other, companies, that they are replacing electrical cars with, other traditional cars that we know, for granted. So basically, the world is changing, and we have to cope up with this, whether we like it or not.
So whether we like it or not, how can we be coping up with this? Do we have predictions of what will happen in the future, as you mentioned, in the next 40 or 50 years? Do we know what will happen? Do we know that this profession is not going to be there in the future and another profession will be created in the near future? So we need to be changing the mindset. Do we need to be changing the culture of just depending on being an engineer or a doctor?
Yes. 100%. Thank you actually for even mentioning those two, professions, because most of the parents, and as educational advisor, I've seen that, most of the parents, they want their children either a doctor or an engineer, because this is like what they think that a successful person would be.
Yes.
And the first aspect of the question is actually very important as well, because I would say all of the aspects that you, sir, mentioned is, it's related to that. For example, we have seen how you can get a practical experience from home. Like, for example, virtual internships. It's a great idea, actually, and it's a great startup that would provide students with a practical experience without actually the need of relocating or to buy a tuxedo or something to go for, for work.
Yes.
So accepting something like that, this is the future, whether we like it or not. And this is very important, because the students, even they have to start thinking about how I can gain those skills that would qualify me to the job market. So yeah, of course, virtual internships and this kind of stuff, we have to accept, the related, I would say, new technologies and new ideas right now.
Yes, Mr. Mostafa, as an educational advisor, and in Egypt we have entered the marathon of the secondary certificate tests here in the country, in Egypt, ثانوية العامة, because the general secondary certificate, because it affects the future of thousands of people and thousands of families every year. How do you see the culture, as you've mentioned, the mindset that needs to be changing? How do you advise the people, the parents, and the children or the students at their tests nowadays? What do you tell them?
First, I would tell them, do your best, without looking actually to any kind of pushing, whether it's from parents or family and from the community, because the community also, put some pressure on those students in a sense. It's related actually to what we have mentioned, to be either a doctor or an engineer. You have to get a certain GPA in order to actually enter those, faculties, which is completely wrong. As we have just mentioned, the future actually is going towards information technology. So as a matter of fact, whether you are engineer, or if we are talking about a practical example here, doctors, medical doctors in the States, they pay a great amount of money for taxes, for example.
Yes.
So engineers, same case. If we are talking about information technology related jobs, you can work from any part of the world, and actually some parts of the world, they would save the taxes and this kind of stuff. They would give you the salary completely tax-free. So how that would be for somebody who would be, for example, computer science graduate or computer engineer, comparing to a medical doctor. Of course, I'm not talking about if a student is passionate, or if a person is passionate about being a medical doctor or being an engineer, well done, okay, go for it.
Yes.
But don't actually be follower of what people say and what community is putting pressure on you just to be one of those models. Otherwise, you are a failure.
I need to be succeeding as just this model or that.
Exactly, because it's like an equation of either to be that, person, or you are a failure, which is completely, of course, this is, I would say, the main problem, the main dilemma, if so to speak, for the Egyptian, mentality in order to be changing. And I believe that if we actually if we have be able, or if we be capable of changing this mindset, I would say that we will solve at least 50% of our problems related to education.
Yeah, speaking of the mindset and the culture, after finishing the secondary education, the university, or graduating university, we are looking at a new prospect of being an entrepreneur. The entrepreneurship in the world and the entrepreneurship in Egypt, how much of a difference and how much of an effort we need to be putting into being an entrepreneur with an idea of having your own business. Is it much of a risk of creating your own business here in the country nowadays?
Actually, in this regard, I've seen that we have a great infrastructure. We started to have a great infrastructure for entrepreneurs here in Egypt. We have started to have the main aspects of the ecosystem,
yes,
of the entrepreneurship here in Egypt. Still, we are still behind a little bit in some sectors regarding the education, regarding, the entrepreneurship. But I believe that we are in the right direction because we have seen some startups, some Egyptian startups, they are booming, and like they have been globally recognized, worldwide. So,
yes,
so this is very important. The entrepreneurship is still, I would say, it's the social solution for every social problem. So it's actually, you are getting people from all over the world trying to solve a social issue or a challenge through innovating a new, I would say, solutions in order to tackle these problems. This is entrepreneurship in a nutshell. And I've seen entrepreneurs here in Egypt, even in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates. I've seen Egyptian entrepreneurs who are doing very well, in their startups, and actually solving not even Middle East related problems, but even global challenges and global issues. So this is something that we have like a great, I would say, we have a great, we have taken great steps in this road as well.
Yes, those steps, are they enough, or do we need to be having more steps in the near future to be assisting whoever thinks that he has an idea, as you said, a social solution for a social problem? So we need ideas for those problems to be becoming a solution in the future. Do we have good assistance for the people who think that they have ideas?
In a sense, I would say yes, because we have seen a growing number of business incubators and accelerators, which is basically, if I'm an entrepreneur with an idea and I want to do my own startup, I would at least, starting from something called the pre-incubator, which is would incubate my idea, regarding to how I can start from scratch, and how to get, for example, a team and build a team, how I can be able to use technology in order to solve some of the problems of setting up a startup at the beginning. So we have seen actually number of business incubators and accelerators here in Egypt that they assist entrepreneurs in the very early stage. But moving forward, we haven't seen, for example, venture capitals that would help entrepreneurs who succeeded in their, at least who get a great numbers or a great traction in their startups. We haven't seen venture capitals that would be specialists, in actually helping those entrepreneurs to be global, to be international. At some point, some of the Egyptian entrepreneurs, they go worldwide, they go to live in another country, would provide them some support. But of course, on the other hand, they will take their, the fruits of their startups and everything related to that. But I seen that in the very early stage of any entrepreneur who would actually find some help here in Egypt, but at some point, they need to go somewhere else in order to proceed or to complete what they have started. So I believe that in venture capitals and related accelerators that would finance the entrepreneurs and the startups. We need more of that in the next few.
So is it more about the money? Do you think that the entrepreneurs, they need more money from the government, from the banks to be funding their ideas and the small and medium enterprises?
Yeah, the money is very important at some point, or
Yes.
I would
At the
say the
beginning?
finance. Yeah, not at the beginning,
Ah.
which is surprise enough, because it's not the beginning. As a matter of fact, if you have the right team,
Yes.
as an entrepreneur, if you have the right resources not necessarily to be financial resources.
Yes.
We are talking about resources generally. You are okay to set yours, and I have actually, because I can talk about that because I've started also, my own startup,
Yes.
back in years, back in 2017.
Yes.
I would say that I didn't start with fund or financial, resources. I started with a great team, a great idea. As a matter of fact, mentors. The very important aspect of how you actually survive in the very early stage.
Yes.
If you have those at the beginning, you are well set. You are set to go. But at some point, you will need, of course, finance from investors, not necessarily from the government, by the way, but the government would supervise how investors would help the startups in order to, survive and to be able to continue on. So investors would at least, for example, instead of putting my money in the bank and having a risk-free related, income, I can still invest in startups and even, boosting the whole national income, because SMEs are very important, stream of national income and GDP.
Yes.
SMEs, which is small and medium enterprises.
Yes.
So, and on the other hand, of course, they will get more profit comparing to what the bank would give them if they put, for example, their money in the banks. So actually looking from this aspect, or from this, from this glasses, I would say it would be a win-win situation for both startups and, entrepreneurs, and also investors on the other hand.
You've mentioned a very important point in the journey of being an entrepreneur in Egypt, I think, because you said that in the middle of the journey, at the middle of the journey, they think, I could be going somewhere else, having more money, having more support, and my idea would be growing even to be reaching the international level. So how can we stop that? Because we have seen that in different fields like sports recently. How can we stop that?
Honestly, it would get back to the same answer of education related, challenge. It would be the policies, because, for example, many startups, they pay taxes, 20%, for example, taxes from their income, especially at this early stage. Most of their income, actually, we have this terminology that's called money burning. So basically, they burn the money related that they earn in order to would do the startup bigger and bigger, so in order to increase their numbers. But on the other hand, you would see that at least 22% would be not for their startups. So actually, this is taxation related. So they go for other countries that would provide 1%, 2%, 5%. As a matter of fact, some countries, they provide tax-free. If they if you started your own business there,
Yes.
they would welcome something like that, and encourage you by not taking any taxes, at least, for example, for the first 5 years. So this is the policies related, for example, to financial policies. Exactly. So for the financial policies and how we can look at the entrepreneurship as a way actually of solving solutions that we have been suffering from in the past decades. If we have looked at that way, I believe that we would solve many of our problems here in Egypt, and even in the developing countries generally.
Yes, a social solution for a social problem, as you've named it. Mr. Mostafa Said, the entrepreneur and the education advisor, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of Windows for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. See you.